Hello, friends, and welcome to the April 30th edition of Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly opportunity for mainstream Texans of faith to learn about public policy issues here in the great state of Texas and have a conversation about how we can engage in that process together. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Outreach Director, and today's episode is being brought to you by Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas. And today is our 100th episode, cue audience noise. And we have a good chunk of the Texas Impact office who will be joining us for this special edition. But I wanted to take a moment at the top to thank you. The first 100 episodes have brought some incredible memories for me and for the entire Texas Impact staff. We have recorded from locations throughout Texas. We have had countless numbers of incredible guests. And time again, we have called on you, Texans of faith, to act. And you have responded. And my favorite thing about this podcast, and frankly, the favorite thing in my job, is getting to talk to and hear from you, Texans who are living out your faith values by engaging in the policy process. And over the last 2 years, we have been proud to be a resource for your advocacy efforts through this podcast. And I'll be honest today, it's a little bittersweet recording this episode because I would have loved to have been celebrating with each of you in person. I would much rather be broadcasting today in front of a live audience as opposed to trying to figure out how to record a podcast on Zoom with 6 people in subpar audio, barking dogs and Wi-Fi glitches. I love being in the presence of you all. And we had planned on having a series of in-person faith and democracy events this spring and summer and are now having to try to figure out ways to advocate electronically or virtually. It is certainly not the way we had prepared to spend our 2020. But those challenges are minor compared to the challenges that many, including many of you, are facing throughout the state and throughout the country as the COVID-19 virus continues to spread. And we continue to pray for you and your congregations as you find new and creative ways to be in ministry with your congregation, as well as doing the important work to meet unprecedented and unmet needs in your local communities. I also want to say a special thanks to the congregations and faith leaders who are continuing to encourage members to stay home, to stay safe, and to worship remotely. And another word of thanks to the first responders and frontline workers who are doing the important work necessary to keep priority components of our society going. And in the midst of all of that, elected officials are trying to figure out what in the world to do to respond to the needs of their local communities and constituents. And they need communities of faith and faith leaders now more than ever to share with them what you're experiencing and what recommendations you would have to best meet the needs of your local communities. So, friends, this is the moment. We need you to step up. It's a perfect time to sign up to be part of our rapid response team, our legislative engagement groups, which is having its first training next week on May 7th. If you haven't received your invitation to that training, you're probably not signed up. So if you'd like to sign up for either one of those opportunities, you can go to texasimpact.org or email me at scott@texasimpact.org. So with all of that out of the way, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel of Texas Impact staff. Today we'll be joined by our Executive Director, B. Moorhead. B, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
By COVID-19 standards, I am well. We also have with us Joshua Houston, our Advocacy Director. Hey, Josh.
Hey, how are you?
Fabulous. We have with us Emma Davis, our Operations and Membership Director. Emma, thanks for being on.
Thanks.
We have with us Erica Nelson, our Courts and Ports Coordinator. Hey, Erica.
Hi, everybody.
And last but not least, the person who's usually behind the camera when we're set up in the office, Joe Zapp, our Communications Coordinator. Hey, Joe.
How's it going?
Doing well, as we all are, and we are all certainly hoping that you are well also. So Josh, we're going to start out with you since you are the person who has been on Weekly Witness the most as a guest. 2 weeks ago, we talked about religious freedom in a really outstanding podcast with some folks from the Americans United for Separation in Church and State. And since then, religious freedom has been front and center in our conversations here in Texas, including an op-ed in the Dallas Morning News by your former pastor, George Mason. So bring us up to speed. What all has happened in the last 2 weeks in terms of religious freedom, and what else should Texans know about what's happened since the last time you and I were together?
Yeah, I mean, I want to start off. I want to start off by saying the overwhelming majority of faith communities are staying home. It's a astoundingly high number. I just saw a poll on it from the Public Religion Research Institute that came out today. I haven't had a time to fully digest it yet, but it was like in the single digits, the number of people who are trying to defy these orders and go to church. That said, there has been, of course, several executive orders, a series of executive orders. One a couple weeks ago decided to treat us as essential. And then there have been 3 different guidance documents issued by the Attorney General and the governor about what houses of worship, guidance on what they should be doing. And on the one side, out of one side of their mouth, they kind of say, you have the freedom to do this. And then out of the other side, but please really don't. And then they keep moving the various guidance documents around on what it is they're recommending. So that prompted an op-ed in the Dallas Morning News from Rabbi David Stern, a prominent rabbi in the Dallas area, and Reverend George Mason of Wilshire Baptist Church. They're good friends and both very serious defenders of religious freedom. You can look at their careers and a long history there. And they wrote it, and it correctly said, religious freedom is not absolute. And if ever there was a time for government to have a compelling interest to curb that freedom, this is certainly it. And they correctly likened it to free speech, where you're not supposed to shout fire in a crowded theater. That's the saying that a lot of people know about free speech. Same's true with religion in this standpoint, and they make that parallel before getting into some of the law about that. If you want to read it for yourself, I have tweeted it. My handle is TX Impact Council. If you do not already follow me on Twitter, I tweeted it out yesterday. Yeah, I mean, this is just one of those things where your rights end where somebody else's begins. That has always been just, we thought, assumed in American law. And it's not just an issue of one individual getting affected and bearing the consequences. They then infect others that had no desire to be a part of their religion. And that includes healthcare workers who are trying to save other people. So it's really almost like going into a disaster zone after a hurricane and making things worse for the first responders.
So, Josh, I usually don't ask you for your opinion on things, but here I'm going to go ahead and do it. It's the 100th episode, and I'm feeling it today, I guess. We have government now telling us, elected officials here in Texas, saying that if you meet these certain criteria, you can meet in person. And we have faith leaders, denominational leaders of all stripes who are saying, we don't think it's safe yet. Would your opinion, personal opinion, be that folks should follow the guidance of their religious leaders?
Yes. I think there's an ethical duty that we should all think about as people of faith. And this is not, the more this spreads, the more people get hurt. It's not, I don't have to be an epidemiologist to know that. And if you're loving your neighbor, the neighborly thing to do is to do everything you can to keep yourself out of the transmission chain.
I agree. I think our faith leaders have our best interest at heart, and I know our bishop has recommended that churches not meet through the month of May, and I'm proud that our church is going to be following that advice, and hope others will consider listening to their faith leaders as well. So, Josh, I did mention that you are our most frequent guest on Weekly Witness. I think you've been on at least a third of the episodes, especially during legislative session. You're there every week.
Count them up, did you?
Go ahead.
How many did you count it up?
I didn't. I'll do that and report back on that. So you have been a partner in this effort, especially during legislative session. You are the person in the building who's reporting back to folks about how they can engage in the process. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on how Weekly Witness over the first 100 episodes has impacted public policy in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, it's allowed us to cover a lot more ground together than it could ever allow any individual to cover. I know people don't like the war metaphors, but in a way, it's like a force multiplier where I am the registered lobbyist, one of the several registered lobbyists for the organization. I can cover a number of bills. It hasn't really necessarily changed that, but it has made a difference in these three ways because, I mean, if it's just me, the staff and legislators wonder, does he represent real people? He doesn't contribute money or endorsements or time to my campaign. Is he real? And so in at least three different ways, it has made the team effort that this project of democracy and also Texas Impact is. One, those phone calls come in before I visit and after I visit. And that is immensely helpful to answering that question of does he represent real people? I would say, two, it has made the substance of the calls much more effective, much more deep, much more substantive. The quality of the call is really going up. And that means the credibility of you, of the organization, of the position on the issue is just that much higher. And it is better for democracy on the whole in that way. And then third, I think the ability to share information through this medium has made the phone calling of those who do call much more confident, which means they have a good experience, which means they'll do it again. And if they do it again, the more calls, the more effective. So I think in quantity, it has, both in quality and quantity, it has been extremely helpful, which helps the state overall.
All right. Thank you, Josh. And thanks for your continued participation in Weekly Witness. I know folks love to hear from you. Somebody that folks don't hear from as often, but who has probably been at as many episodes of Weekly Witness, if not more, than Josh, is Joe Zapp, our communications coordinator. Joe, you have been behind the camera for many of these episodes, and I'm sad that you can't be behind the camera today and we're having to do it by Zoom. But I wonder if you might like to spend a moment offering your reflections on Weekly Witness from behind the scenes.
Like you said, largely before this, this part was done through a phone and live streamed to Facebook. So it's just quite a different change of pace. Now instead I just log in and you've uploaded a file, and largely the major bit that I do, which is the editing of it and exporting and uploading, is still constant. So that's sort of been nice, and that I can maintain that routine of work, given all the other changes in life that everybody's experiencing for the first time.
Any reflections on Weekly Witness content or anything you've experienced over your time here?
Just that, it's largely a lot of down to earth. Like if people are ever wondering what can I do to participate, like it's here, it just takes you listening.
Well, we will have a special edition one day when all of this is over, where we can talk about the outtakes and things we had to cut from episodes, but we'll save that for another day. Bee's shaking her finger at us. Erica, immigration has been a focus of more episodes than any other single issue. And we've had several episodes recorded live from Courts and Ports trips, including our trip to DC, several from the border. As our Courts and Ports coordinator, how has Texas Impact's emphasis changed on immigration since the pandemic started, and what will your focus be over the course of the next 12 months?
Well, our focus has changed in that we can no longer go to the border to experience what's happening, for several reasons, for the health and safety of participants, but also for the health and safety of the migrants who are currently very vulnerable and living on the streets and just exposed to the elements as well as to the disease. And so right now our focus has shifted more towards federal policy, particularly coronavirus response and bills in order to include immigration and immigrants into the consideration. We need to make sure that their healthcare is being taken care of. We need to make sure that their families are being taken care of economically. And so right now we've shifted more to civic engagement, having our members call their legislators to include immigrants into consideration for coronavirus stimulus bills. And I think that will continue to be our focus until things are safe enough that we can get back to the border.
Well, I know we will all be looking forward to that day. For folks who are interested in immigration issues, we had a podcast a couple of weeks ago with Trini, with the ELCA, talking about specific pieces of legislation and calls that people should be making right now. Emma Davis, let's turn to you as our membership and operations director. I usually do a quick membership pitch at the end, but since you're here, why is Weekly Witness important to your work, and what do you hope people will do when they finish listening to this podcast today?
Yeah, so Weekly Witness is actually extremely important to the work that I do. I think that sometimes we tend to separate engagement and membership, and the reality is that Weekly Witness is the best way that people can actively engage with our organization, especially right now. And that's kind of cool right now that as all of these organizations and everyone's kind of scrambling to move all their programming to online, that we already have this established virtual program where we're able to actively continue to resource our members and people of faith throughout the state. So, we see as people become more engaged and as they become more consistently engaged, they're more likely to invest in the sustainability of the organization by becoming a member. And the best way that you can do that, especially right now, is, to give to the organization and consider becoming a member, which you can do online at texasimpact.org/join. You will also have a chance to give this Tuesday, May 5th. Usually there is a end-of-year national campaign called Giving Tuesday, where nonprofits around the country encourage people to participate in a day of giving. But in response to the unprecedented sort of crisis of COVID-19, Giving Tuesday now is a mid-year response happening this Tuesday, May 5th, for organizations to unite in fundraising for their nonprofits. So if you are an active listener of Weekly Witness, you will receive more information about that on Monday, and also will receive the appropriate links in order to give if you would like to participate this Tuesday.
And in addition to giving, they should also invite their friends to do the same and share social media content and all of that, right?
Yes.
Excellent. You like me asking a question that I know the answer to. So last but certainly not least, we have our executive director, B. Moorhead, with us. And B, we talked for a long time about launching a podcast before it actually happened, right? So I wonder if you can talk some about how this process came to be, but more importantly, where you hope it will go next in this uncertain world that we're going to be entering for our next 100 episodes.
Sure. Well, it's an interesting deal because Weekly Witness started very much as an in-person activity, right? It started out as, an opportunity for people to come to the Capitol and get a little briefing once a week so that they could go do legislative visits during the session. And then, I guess it seemed like people weren't able to come every week, but they still wanted to see your smiling face every week. And so we moved from just in person to broadcasting it online. And from there took the audio of that Facebook Live initially to a podcast format. So I think it's interesting in light of where we are now. As Emma said earlier, we've been gearing up for this kind of, web-based engagement for a couple of years now. And really, we're kind of perfectly positioned, I think, to be able to take the resource that you've helped us put in place and really maximize its utility for people, the faith community and all your other audience and fans all over the state. The thing that I'm excited about right now is that in the same way that we've made more and more people who can't come to one location be able to get that information, we're also making more and more of the information come from places far from here. So when we did this fall, we did that series on reimagining justice, the health equity series, and we were able to feature speakers from different states, from organizations where they never would have come to Texas just to give a little talk, which was great for our folks. This next week, we are starting something I'm really excited about and have kind of been wishing for a long time, and now we have the perfect kind of opportunity. Most people might be sort of dimly aware that their faith community has some sort of national umbrella presence, and maybe they know that there's a lobbyist in Washington, but most people are not really plugged into the depth of their faith traditions' participation in national policy. The Washington Interreligious Staff Community is the body that kind of coordinates and convenes more than 40 religious organizations at the national level. And starting next week, you're going to be featuring guests from the Washington Interreligious Staff Community to help our Texas Impact Weekly Witness audience connect the dots between what's going on in DC and the kinds of advocacy that they can do here in Texas as Texas and the rest of the country kind of find our way together through what is currently a public health crisis and is becoming rapidly an economic crisis that's likely to go on for a long time. We've all been on, various forms of webinars and watch TV and know enough to know that the Texas budget next year is likely to be catastrophic. We know that the elections are becoming complicated. We know that the census is now all full of uncertainty, and we're for sure going to need all of our network, all the people of faith in Texas, and I would say everyone in all the other states working with their state faith communities as well, to help the country move forward. So I think Weekly Witness is well positioned to be a leader for a lot of people. And I am just glad that you were hanging out in Huntsville and willing to take this on when I called you up. So good job, and congratulations on your first 100 episodes, Scott. And we are all excited for you to have hundreds and hundreds more.
Yeah, so thanks. We certainly are looking forward to the next 100 episodes, and it's been an incredible ride so far. I wonder if anybody else has thoughts on where we should be going or with the next 100 episodes, or what we should be thinking about in the year to come.
Well, yeah, I think it's going to get super important. So lobbyists talk for a living, and we talk to each other. And there's a lot of talk in the lobby about just the level of uncertainty surrounding the next legislative session in January. There's kind of a range of possibilities. And on one end of the spectrum, you've got it's completely normal. The virus has burned through the population. We have herd immunity, and things go on just as they did before. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have situations where the kind of drastic measures get taken, where only the elected officials are allowed to be in the Capitol. Their staff are working from home. no lobby at all is allowed in the building. No constituent visits are allowed. You have questions then about can you even take them out to dinner kind of situations being talked about in the lobby. And what that means, nobody has an answer. Every lobbyist in town is trying to figure out that exact situation and how in the world to do their jobs, because it is called government relations, and if you can't relate, how do you do it? So with regard to what we're doing here today, on the one hand, I think you see campaign contributions become all the more influential, which is not necessarily good. And visits become very hard. I can't just go walk in someone's office and chat with them. It really becomes a situation of who has whose cell phone number at that point. And if staff are working from home in that kind of worst case scenario thing that I mentioned, how does constituent calling work if it's being forwarded to a cell phone and that cell phone's not being answered because the staffer is just overwhelmed? So that's kind of a worst case scenario. But I think that's where having Weekly Witness is so vital to be able to get that information out there. And then I know, Scott, I don't know if you want to preview this yet or not, but the legislative engagement groups that we were working to create it before there was a virus, or just before it was within our collective consciousness, which are small groups of people that are really adopting their House district. And the more I think you can have small groups of people active and known in a local House district, the more likely you'll be able to bust through the noise and be influential in the session. That's kind of the thing that I think groups of people can counter money still. And I think that is still, with these legislative engagement groups, one of the ways that we can respond. The sign-ups, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, you can sign up now. It comes out in the e-news every week. If it's probably somewhere online, y'all can answer that for me. And then we're going to have training soon, and I'll let you answer things that you know better than me.
Absolutely. So yeah, legislative engagement groups, our first training will be next Thursday, May 7th. You can sign up for those on our website, texasimpact.org, or just email me at scott@texasimpact.org and I can get you that information. It is really important that folks figure out who in your community you can work with to build relationships with your legislators now. Because as Josh mentioned, this legislative session could be unlike anything we've ever seen before. So we need to start that planning process now. So we are going to be focusing in the next couple of weeks about how congregations can respond to the coronavirus pandemic in your local communities. We'll be sharing some best practice ideas and ways that you can advocate on issues at the federal and state level. So tune in for that. Anything else anybody would like to add in closing today? All right, getting nods no from the Zoom squares. Well then, Texas Impact staff, B, Josh, Emma, Erica, Joe, thank you all. Thanks for taking the time today, and thanks for the work that you're doing every day to make Texas a better place, and all the work you're doing to support this podcast and the people who are listening. You make an enormous difference, and I know the state of Texas is grateful for the work that you are doing to equip them each and every day. And thank you all for tuning in. If you have ideas for how we can better resource you and your congregation and your advocacy efforts, please reach out to me. It's scott@texasimpact.org. This is a wrap on the first 100 episodes of Weekly Witness, and I really look forward to what the next 100 will bring. We hope that you will share this content with your friends and congregations and networks so we can expand the influence of mainstream Texans of faith committed to justice. And that work, that public witness will continue to grow in the weeks and months to come. And I won't say it as well as Emma did, but remember that if you appreciate this work that Texas Impact and the Weekly Witness community is continuing to do, make sure that you have joined. Make sure that you and your congregation are members. And again, you can do that at texasimpact.org/join. Friends, these are anxious times, but the world needs the faith community engaged and active. So let's get to work. Thanks, friends.